You know what they say, never talk about politics, religion, or sex, lest you risk damaging your friendships. But what happens when you have three people whose friendship is built on debating those very topics? One's a believer surrounded by skeptics, one's a heterosexual surrounded by gays, and one's a moderate surrounded by extremists, and they're all hardly qualified. Introducing Hardly Qualified, a podcast recorded in prosperous Calgary, Alberta, where Will Connor, Rob Walker, and Angry Duck get together every week to discuss the issues of the day. Rob's on the left, Duck is on the right, and Will is stuck in the middle. And here they are, hardly qualified to pontificate about the issues they're talking about. But if nothing else, they're entertaining.
Thank you for joining us again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Connor, and you're listening to Hardly Qualified, but you already know that because you listened to our wonderful intro. To the right of me, I have Ducky.
Hi.
With such enthusiasm. And to the left of me,
Oh my god, you guys, how you doing today? Woo!
To the left of me, I have Rob, who's recovering from a visit with near death, I hear.
Well, something like that. Or a bunch of Daleks.
A bunch of Daleks, eh?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Well, recovered from your flu. We actually missed an episode. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. We tried to plan. We actually have backup episodes, but they're not ready yet. So
that was, yeah, I was going to have the one that we did last week when Bob was sick ready, but I got swamped at work, and then I thought I had sent Will a message saying, hey, I was swamped at work. I don't think I'll be able to do the podcast, and apparently I didn't. And then
your telepathy is broken.
I get a text message on Friday morning or whatever, and he's like, so, the episode not ready yet? And Wang, my buddy Wang, sends me a message. He's like, what's the matter? Is there no Hardly Qualified this week? And I was like, oh shit, I knew I forgot something important.
Well, that's okay. I covered for you, at least for, 30 seconds or so. So we're still going strong. We have no intention of keeping our mouth shut for any reasonable length of time, so you can listen to us babble for a long time. I hear that if we make it past 20, that tends to be the mark of a good podcast. The vast majority, something like 90% of podcasts die before episode 20.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So even if we are going to quit, we will go to 21 just to spite y'all.
Yeah. It's like the middle of season 2 for television shows.
Yeah. So
if you can make it over the middle of season 2, you're good for 7 years.
7 years? You want to do this for 7 years? Can you imagine episode like 500? Do you think we'll still be friends come episode 500?
Sure we
will. I doubt that we would no longer be friends. I mean, it's not like our relationship hasn't weathered a bunch of other nonsense.
That's true.
This is true. This is very true. Well, Rob, seeing that we haven't heard from you in a while, how was your week?
My week was good. Yeah, after I sounded less Dalek-like, life sort of stabilized. I've just been actually watching a lot of documentary-ish kind of stuff this week in my spare time. So I ended up watching a documentary called The Captains.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and I really...
Is that the one about the Star Trek captains?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and done by William Shatner.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I've never actually seen it.
You got to see it. Avery is just completely nuts, man.
Oh, I love Avery Brooks. That's my favorite bit of the whole thing was Avery.
Like he is either completely crazy or amazingly brilliant, but whatever he is, it's too much that I can't decide.
Yeah, this is it. This is it.
Right?
Deep Space Nine was probably my favorite Star Trek series.
Thank you. You know, almost everyone I talk to on this end of the country thinks I'm absolutely crazy. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm a big DS9 fan, and the fact that I like DS9 so much contributes to why I like Battlestar Galactica so much. So for me, it's sort of tied together. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I found that Deep Space Nine was really where they started. I think I saw a special where Avery Brooks had actually talked about it, and he had said that or maybe it was Michael Dorn. I can't remember. One of the two. And they were talking about how all of the conflict that comes for the storytelling is internalized. It's not external. Like, you're not in a spaceship going to some weird place where you have to persevere, right? I mean, you have a setting that's concrete that rarely changes. Mm-hmm. And I will admit that Deep Space Nine was a little bit weak at the beginning, but as soon as they introduced the Dominion and the whole political intrigue between the Cardassians and the Romulans and the Dominion War and all of that, that is my kind of storytelling.
Yeah, exactly right.
I don't know. I'm still a fan of TNG, but you know what? I like the whole series. I think they all offered something different. I think Enterprise would have hit its stride if it would have had another year, but
I think that's right too. And I actually quite liked Enterprise.
I did too. I mean, there's a couple of things that were a little weird, and it kind of lost a little bit of credibility to me when what's her face decided to perk her nipples up for everybody to see, and I was like,
to Paul or whatever.
Yeah, well, yeah, I love hot chicks. And I love perky nipples, don't get me wrong. That's like my favorite. Anyway, that being said, that to me just screamed fan service.
Oh, right.
And I think that as soon as a piece of media starts doing fan service, it's no longer staying true to... You know what I mean?
Okay, so since we're clearly on a Trek nerd or Trek geek kick, do you think that Voyager did the same thing, bringing 7 of 9 on the series?
Oh, come on, it goes all the way back to Deanna Troi. Or you know what? You can even go all the way back to Uhura. Like really?
I don't. Okay, I disagree about Uhura. I do.
Really?
For various reasons.
Come on, that was pretty scandalous.
Well, I think that was how
a black woman in a power position in
anyway.
a miniskirt being taken seriously. Are you kidding me? For the time?
Well, that was pretty cool. But I don't think that the original series originally wanted to portray her as a sex object. And I also don't think it was nearly that way for Deanna Troi either.
I don't think it was that way for anybody, really, even to Paul.
Okay.
Right? But there's really, no sort of redeeming situation in which hard nipples is...
You can't tell me that 7 of 9 wasn't a sex object.
Well, I think she clearly was.
I think the character had sex appeal, but that's way different than being a sex object.
I think Voyager lucked out completely in the sense that they clearly wanted to appeal to 18 to 34 or whatever it was, demographic, and they happened to hire a brilliant actor. So I think they lucked out, but I do think that 7 of 9 was a ratings grab, and it happened to work brilliantly for them. That's my opinion.
I would concur, I think. Yeah. No, I'm going to commit to that opinion. I concur.
Okay. Well, I'm a little ambivalent with it, so.
Fair enough.
What else is new?
Really? I'm like, this is practically the only time Ducky's ever been ambivalent in the whole damn show, but congratulations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I can see how people could come to that conclusion, but personally I don't see it that way.
So going back to the captains.
Yes.
My favorite part was actually Shatner and Patrick Stewart.
Okay.
And there was this epiphany moment with Shatner and Stewart where they were talking about cons. And Shatner was saying that, I've never really liked the things. I've always kind of found people needy. He's done Tech Wars. He's done his spoken word music thing-ish, whatever that is.
Yes, whatever that is.
He's done productions, directing, writing. I mean, Tech Wars is, I don't know so much about the TV series, but the books, he's a talented man. He's a very creative man. And I think he said it really bothered him for years that people only identified him as Captain Kirk. And so he said to Patrick Stewart, he's like, you yourself, you're an accomplished person on the theater. He's a classically trained Shakespearean actor. He's played in the, and I'm probably screwing up the names of it, but, the high prestigious theaters in the UK and Broadway. Like he's, more than just a TV star. And he's like, so how do you deal with that, going to these places where people only ever know you as Captain Picard? And, you just kind of see Stewart thinking about it. And the message that, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, that he came out with it was, you know what, I don't get to choose how people, or I get to, the great thing about being on stage is you get to speak messages and hopefully you'll touch somebody, but you don't get to choose how they're touched and how they'll remember you. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to choose what gifts that they receive. And Gene's gift, his ideology, is if that is the only gift that they take, that is definitely a gift worth giving. And you just kind of see it in Shatner's face. There's this one moment where he gets it, mm-hmm. right? And my understanding is right around that time is when Shatner started showing up at cons. Like he's there now. Like he's not as hostile to them.
Right.
I don't do cons. It's not my thing. But you know, for people who want that type of hero worship, it really means a lot for them when they show up. And to be acknowledged, like when did it go off the air? 74, 79, something like that?
It started in mid 66 and went off the air in 69.
69, okay.
Yeah.
So that's like 10 years before. So we're talking like 45 years later, and he's still, you know, incredible. Did you see the Oscars? I don't know if you saw the Oscars.
Mm-mm.
But he opened with Seth MacFarlane on the Oscars.
Oh, interesting.
In you know, the Captain Kirk uniform from, I think it was Star Trek 6.
The red ones with the white shoulder patch thing?
Nice.
And, you know, instantly recognizable. You know, people knew the character. They could relate to it. And sure, the movies are a little more, you know, recent, but people only have that connection because of the shows from the 60s, right? So,
right.
You know, that type of endurance, that type of legacy, I wish I could have something like that. Because I'm an egoist. No.
Oh, please.
No, but I kind of am, you know.
You know, I think everybody is. I mean, you know, for those of us who, we know that for us there's nothing after but what we leave behind. And we want to make sure that the place is better than when we found it.
Right.
Right?
And even that diminishes over time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's only so many Orwells or so many Hemingways that the world will acknowledge.
But, you know, what's interesting about that, too, is that you aren't always recognized during your time as making a contribution, mm-hmm. but right. People find you afterwards. And so, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
like, how many people know who Van Gogh was before he could
That's
die,
right. That's right.
So for all we know, we're the greatest philosophers of the 24th century.
Could be, yeah. To be excellent to each other.
Yeah. Dude.
Dude.
That's a Bill and Ted Magical Adventure or whatever illusion for those of us who most excellent.
Yes.
Tell we're children of the 80s. Eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that trip down memory lane, Rob.
Thanks.
Ducky, how's your week?
Well, I'm taking over at work, and because I'm taking over, taking over as in like pure force of will. I'm dominating the minds of the people around me. Yes, I am the new Overmind.
You've been playing a little too much StarCraft, my friend.
Oh, did you hear about Captain Power? I'm going to talk about Captain Power in a minute. No, what's going on at work is I have to go in and had to go in and get a certification for inventory management and stuff. Which is all stuff that I've been doing anyway since I started there. It was what I was trained to do, but I hadn't actually gone and earned the recognition, like the certificate, the paper for it. And I can't get paid the wage that the position, demands without having the paper to show that I know what I'm doing, right? So I had to go in, like I usually work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and I finish off, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday mornings around 7 o'clock. And so Saturday night, I went into work, and then Monday morning at 7 a.m. and Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I had to go in for 8-hour shifts to do my certification and training and all that fun stuff. And then Wednesday night, go back in for my regular 5 days. So technically I've only worked 6 out of the last 7 days, but it feels like a full 7 days in a row. So if you can't tell by my voice, I am fairly exhausted, and I'm glad that tonight's my last night, and then I can have a couple of days off. But I am now in charge of all of the packaged pastry at our store. So
how are you taking over? How are you taking over?
What do you mean, how am I taking force of will? I told you.
No, but what are you taking over? Like, have you just told your manager, you know what, don't bother?
Yeah.
Like, it's just better if you just don't show up, okay?
No, I don't know. I'm a fairly dominant personality.
Really?
Yeah, so I have no problems taking leadership roles and leadership positions and taking the initiative to do that kind of stuff. And because of that, I have people who have been working there for years before me looking to me for guidance and leadership and instruction. Direction. That's probably my biggest problem, is people who've been there for 4 or 5 years are looking to me for direction.
Right.
You know? Like, I need to tell them how to stack a milk crate type thing.
I'm going to start calling you Guru Ducky. Either that or Sweetfoot. I think Sweetfoot.
Sweetfoot. Yay! So, yeah, did you guys hear about Captain Power?
I've heard something about Captain Power.
Please fill me in.
Do you guys remember Captain Power?
Either of you, that was like the TV show where they had the flashing lights and you had a gun or something. And
yeah. When I was growing up, we had there's back in the 80s. For anybody who doesn't know, all the sort of kids shows weren't like storytelling devices. They were marketing ploys to try to trick kids into getting their parents to buy them the toys. Right? Worked for Transformers, worked for Barbie, and it worked for a franchise called Captain Power.
And nothing has changed since then, by the way.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's, I think that's a whole another story. So anyway, where was I?
Captain Power.
Yes, Captain Power. The story of Captain Power was that there was sort of an AI uprising. Like, it's in the future, in 2074 or something. And there was an AI uprising, much like most post-apocalyptic dystopian future storylines are, where the AIs take over. And Captain Power has his little band of merry misfits who are, these soldiers of fortune who have access to these things called power suits, which they're basically just fancy suits of armor with special abilities attached to them that they have access to by touching a badge on their chest. It was something that Captain Power's father actually designed. And these power suits have given them the ability to basically wage this sort of guerrilla resistance war against the Biodread Empire, which is the name of the AIs. Who are going around trying to digitize, is what they call it. They basically transcribe all of humanity into electronic code so that they can be stored in a computer.
It's kind of like our last episode.
Yeah. So anyway, it went for about 20 episodes, I think. And they were designed, the show was right on the very beginning of CGI. It was like 85 or 86 or something. So by today's standards, it's pretty, like most, first year animation students can do better than the Captain Power stuff. But they were all designed to interact with the toys, and the toys were fighter ships. Like, there's, little fighter ships and stuff that you could shoot at either each other, right, if you were playing with your friends, or you could shoot them at the TV. And the way it worked was that every time you hit, like, one of the little chess pieces of the guys on the TV, you gained a point, and every time they hit you, you lost a point, and if you lost all your points, your ship blew up, and your cockpit exploded, and your little guy jaw fell out, and you were done for the game. But, I guess apparently they had marketing on one end and financing on the other that both fell through. And so the story itself, while it was fairly adult at the time, for the time, it was a story worth telling that didn't actually get told because they were, as people are now saying, that Captain Power was 25 years ahead of its time. So the producers of the Captain Plower series, who have gone on to do major shows like Babylon 5 and, Space Above and Beyond and stuff like that.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot like certain pieces of Space Above and Beyond.
Yeah.
Love that show.
Anyway. Yes, my favorite. Anyway, so yeah, they're getting together and they were doing a reboot. And they're rebooting Captain Power into an hour-long adult drama, much in the vein of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica.
Cool.
So that it'll actually go into the story, and they've got backers and they've got a distributor, and as of 2015, I think is what I heard, they're going to be prepared to release it.
Now, is this going to be broadcast or web?
No, it's broadcast. It's going to be a TV show called Phoenix Rising, apparently.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that, because I really liked Captain Power. It was probably one of my favorite... Even as a kid, I was really attracted to dystopian futures, so... I think that Captain Power is kind of like the infancy of my affection for cyberpunk.
Right.
Makes sense.
I mean...
Cool.
So
that'd be really interesting to see how it's executed.
Yeah, because the way the producers were talking is they said that they had a really good story that they wanted to tell, but they just didn't have the technology to do it. And now that they have the technology, we hopefully it doesn't go completely the other way, and it's just a TV show for animation's sake.
Right. CGI.
So,
look at us.
CGI. Yeah, there's a lot of shows that are like that.
And people don't have a lot of patience for that anymore, especially when you're talking about reboots.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the poorly done reboots will die very quickly.
Mm-hmm. So.
But
yeah, I heard about that about
way much more savvy now.
Yeah. I heard about that about a week ago. And,
well, they're bringing back Whose Line Is It Anyway, too.
Really?
Yeah.
When are they going to do that?
I don't know. Colin Mockery just announced it on his Twitter feed yesterday.
No kidding.
That's because Colin Mockery has nothing else going for him.
Are you kidding?
He's had lots of stuff since Whose Line original.
He's incredibly busy. He actually comes to Calgary every, I think it's September, for the Calgary International Improv Festival, and performs. So, Calgary is a huge improvisational theater city. It's the home of the home of theater sports. It's where it was invented, right, at Loose Moose, or at least popularized. We have something like 18 improv troupes here. So.
Oh, no kidding. See, I never knew that about theater sports, because my dad and my little brother and I would go to Loose Moose a couple times a year when I was little, and it was epic. It was so good. So yeah, I had no idea that Loose Moose and troops like that originated theater sports. That's cool.
Yeah, the improv festival is actually hosted by the Improv Guild, which is the big purple building on McLeod Trail. Those guys are great. They come in. I run the improv club, co-run, whatever. The improv club at my university at Mount Royal, and we have the Improv Guild in to open and close our academic years with instruction. So, and they've been incredibly supportive. They also sponsor the Calgary High School Theater Sports Championships, which are going on this upcoming week. So, it's a really strong community here. It's very incestuous, of course, but it's awesome. It's easy to, well, I wouldn't say it's easy to start a team or whatever, but there is a big demand for it here. There's a huge audience, and some cities don't even have one troupe, and it's just a great group of people here, and I love being involved with them. So, but not to take away from Captain Power, but I just I know that Whose Line Is It Anyway may not necessarily be your thing, but for those of us in the collegiate improv, that's kind of
It's a big deal.
Yeah, that's like actually witnessing Jesus walk on water type of thing. we have evidence to see how it's done.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean that as a dig, but I mean it's
sure you did.
It's a big thing. Like it's almost insane how much they're venerated, but it's because it's a highly public demonstration of the
art form.
The art,
yeah,
or the craft. So myself,
yes,
and I know we're coming up on half an hour, so I'll try to make it short, or maybe not. Maybe we'll run on and on and on and on and on. This is actually kind of interesting. I've been thinking about my introduction all week because I'm in the middle of campaigning right now for Vice President University Affairs. Right?
So you are allowed to talk about this now.
I am allowed to talk about this. I have been for a while. Thank you. It occurs to me that when this airs, I will have either won or lost.
Interesting.
And I don't know which one that is right now. And it's kind of driving me nuts. So, people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, did he win? Did he win? Well, you can check and go to williamconnor.ca and it'll say one way or the other. I'll put that up there, but on my campaign website. But
nice.
Or is my personal website that I converted into a campaign website. But it's just kind of... I've been obsessing about it for the last 3 weeks. Getting very little sleep, like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a day, maybe sometimes 2 or 3, on campus all the time, stumping, kissing hands, shaking babies, trying to be everywhere, trying to be visible, writing my platform and policies and policy positions and debates and all these other sorts of political things, and we're a small institution. We're 14,000 students, about, I think, 9,000 full-time, or 11,000 full-time, something like that. And typically, only about 10% of people come out to vote. So I'm making a lot of noise for roughly about 1,300 to 1,400 people, although preliminary numbers are showing that it might be better this year. Then it occurs to me, out of those 1,400 people, that means 90% of the campus doesn't care or isn't aware of what's going on. But even among the 10% that do show up, let's be honest, not everybody's thinking, I really like William's policies over Addie's policies, so I'm going to vote for William. Sometimes it feels futile. It's not futile to run for office because I want it and I have ideas for it, but I just feel like I'm putting a lot of effort, making a lot of shouting, and I realize that a large portion of the population doesn't notice, and of those who do, many of them don't even really care. But it's for those who show up and for those who do care that we do these things. We do it for everybody, but the campaigning process is the display, the peacock strutting around, right, for the population. So it's been an interesting experience.
So the one thing I want to know from you, Will, is did you make a habit of walking around in bright yellow the whole time, or was that just the one meeting?
Actually, you know what? I have several MRU hoodies of different colors. I have like a wine-colored one and a black and white and blue and gray. And part of my strategy, and I can, I guess, reveal this now. I've always been on campus in hoodies, but not exclusively. But for the last month, that's all I've worn to campus is school hoodies. That's kind of my brand that I've been building.
You have one of those sweatpants that says MRU on the ass?
No. They do sell them, though. I don't know who buys them.
They have sweatpants with MRU on the ass?
Yeah.
Oh, God, save me now.
mtworld.ca/bookstore. You can buy them there. I ain't buying you one.
Oh.
But you have a hoodie of mine. Last time you were over, you took one of my blue hoodies.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't have it.
You were on my deck, and you're like, can I borrow this? And I'm like, okay. And you're like, I'll give it back to you. And, well, guess what?
I don't think I...
You stole it?
I left it in Calgary with somebody. Ask...
Okay. Well, I'll check with our friends. Maybe they have it. But I was going through my inventory the other day, and I'm like, hey, I'm short a hoodie. Oh, wait. Rob had it last. Anyway. But yeah, no,
I'm a nice
my
guy.
campaign colors are red, blue, and yellow. Yellow mostly because our building is designed in such a way as that's the one color that pops the most. Mm-hmm. And you can see from my campaign website or my Facebook page or my campaign Facebook page that I've been wearing this bright yellow hoodie. And yes, I actually have for the last week been wearing it everywhere around campus, washing it quite frequently because it is highly, highly visible.
Yes.
You can see me coming from like the other side of campus.
I could see you coming in. There's, a downtown Corby.
You're positively radioactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't realize how bright it was until I saw the photographs.
Right. It's you could almost glow in the dark. Well, almost.
It probably does. It probably does. But they're really comfortable. So, but yeah.
Well,
I wear them anyway.
You looked comfy and focused for what it's worth, but you were bright yellow. I was like, he looks like Tweety.
I can't help but notice that it also seems to match the tips of your hair.
Yeah, that wasn't at all intentional. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's kind of one of these things where it's not something that's not me or authentically me. I frost my hair like this quite frequently. It's just been, I think it was like 4 or 5 months since the last time I got a haircut. The last time I got a haircut was in November, so it had kind of, grown out and whatnot. And it was the day before the debate, and I'm like, you know what, I should do this, and it'll blend it in. I kind of wanted it back, and yellow's my theme, so why not go for it, right? Unfortunately, one piece of bad news that came out of that is during the debate, I received an email from within the campus. I didn't actually read it until the following day, but it was sent to me while I was on stage, and the subject was faggot. And the text was quite simply, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I hate you." So that kind of really sucked, actually. Yeah.
The person identified themselves, "Hi, I hate you."
Well, theoretically, IT Services is still doing a forensic investigation of the network. You can't log on to our networks or our computers either through Wi-Fi or whatever without entering your student ID and your password.
That's true, yeah.
So even if dude was doing it from his iPad or cell phone, they'll find out who it is. So, whether or not the positive identification was as they said it was, like whether they actually identified themselves or they were setting somebody up, that's what we're trying to determine.
Right.
But from what I understand, it may not necessarily be out of the realm of possibility with this particular individual. So, anyway, it kind of freaked me out, actually. When I first got it, I was like, you know what? Whatever, no big deal. Somebody beaking off. I'm supposed to be a politician now, and I still cringe saying that word, but whatever. I'm one of them.
Congratulations, you have a firm grasp of reality.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got to do it, right? Somebody's got to pick up the garbage, and somebody's got to make somebody pick up the garbage. Okay, that sounded really elitist, and that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. But it's part of the structure and the institution, and I would really love the chance to serve. So I'll stop stumping right now. My point was, God, what was my point? What was I talking about? A true politician, eh?
You were talking about the person who emailed you and how much that bothered you.
Oh, right. So my initial reaction was, okay, you know what? It's just an email, somebody beaking off, whatever. I sent an email to IT Services, and I'm like, can you investigate this and report it to the Office of Student Conduct? And then I'm like, I got to go to Class 7 intern. I arrived on campus and parked my car, and honestly, and I'm a pretty self-confident person, and I'm a big guy, and I'm not a martial artist or anything, but I think I can defend myself, and I'm pretty confident and generally feel safe wherever I am. As soon as I got on campus, I was terrified because I didn't know who this person is or what their intentions towards me were. Right?
Right.
And I've never been in a situation like that before. It was very disempowering, and it's really easy in retrospect to brush it off, and actually I spent the better part of a day trying to do so. But upon arriving on campus, I actually went to securities and told them what was going on, that this had happened, and I'd already reported it to IT, and see if they could do something about it. And the school doesn't have any tolerance for this type of stuff. Bullying and harassment isn't, and it's not the type of environment we want as a school.
Is it really bullying and harassment though?
Yeah, it is. And there,
I don't understand an expression of hate. How is that if he's following you or he's giving you deliberate threats, or she? Because we don't know if if it's a he or she, is sending multiple messages, but just, I hate you,
right.
and that's it.
No, that's an absolutely fair question.
Right? To me, that doesn't seem like, I don't want to try to minimize your feelings or whatever, but it seems to me a little bit that a lot of the sort of reaction is centered within your perception. It's not so much that there's an actual threat out there. It's just that you don't know if there's an actual threat, and because of that, you're terrified that there is.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. But that's part of the consequence of an anonymous or pseudo-anonymous act like that, right? Is that, and I realized I did spend a large part of the day, and of course, once I reported this within the system to the security and IT, the university's system kind of and procedures kicked in, and I got pushed through and not like I was dragged or anything, but walked through counseling and OSC and IT. Like, there's this whole procedure that they go through and take you through, make sure you're okay and you're safe and yada, 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 right?
Right. Makes sense.
Their policies and procedures kicked in, and at that point I was along for the ride. And I was surprised at actually how much I felt that I needed it and I could benefit from it. So, and that really bothered me because I didn't want to be bothered by this. I mean, I'm totally with you, Ducky. It's an email. It rather, unpleasant one, but you could argue that it's innocuous. But it comes down to, is it somebody just being a brat, or is it somebody who's giving you a warning? And you don't know. And that ambiguity is the intimidation and the harassing part of that. And especially being called a faggot. Mm-hmm. I'm gay. I'm publicly a public homosexual, I guess. I don't know how you would say that.
Yes.
I've never hidden it. I've always been out. Like, as long as you guys have known me, that's, I think you can attest to that.
Sure.
And I'm very much so like that on campus. I'm not ashamed. I don't have anything to hide. I don't wear flags or, I'm not overly conspicuous about my sexuality.
It's not the center of your identity.
No, it's kind of a happens to be thing, and that's just the way it is, and I don't deny it. So to be accosted like that, and it's not like I've never heard it before, and it's not like even within, conversations internally, like between friends.
It's not like I've never called you a dirty ass faggot.
Have you?
I haven't recently.
But you know what I mean? Like, even Rob, right. Like, sometimes, joke around, you call fags, or it's the same thing with black people calling each other niggers or whatever. It's a form of reclaiming a word, right?
Right.
So it's not like I've not been exposed to it, but it was the fear, the intimidation, and harassment, and the intent was there. I was on stage in a debate. And I realize a lot of people are listening to this aren't going to be able to empathize, and they're not going to be able to relate, and they say, dude, you're overreacting. And I totally get that. I really do, because I was there. And that was part of me was like, you know what? This isn't really a big deal. And that's what I was trying to rationalize all day. But I was still feeling it. And it was that disconnect that really threw me for a loop. Right? Because society says that, well, I wouldn't even say society, whatever. My perception is that it's just an email, I'm a public figure. This type of thing is going to happen. And, eventually it did get reported to the Calgary Police Service. And one of the things the constable said was, as you become more public and public figures, politicians and whatnot, in his experience, the more public you become, the more kooks you attract. And that's just kind of the nature of public life. And, so he said that, don't worry about it so much, but again, even the police service, they're like, we're also not going to take this lightly, because there's that element of you don't know. It's the one guy who you don't address that shows up 3 weeks later with a machine gun. And I'm not saying that is the rule, but I shouldn't have to live like that. And there's here's the bottom line. It might sound like, poor white guy complaining about being harassed in a privileged institution, and to a degree I can buy that, but I think it comes down to more societal decency and community and respect for each other, right? if I don't even know who this guy is. I don't think I've ever met him, let alone done anything to him. So even, in all honesty, I much rather preferred that whoever it was approached me at the debate, during the debate, after the debate, before, whatever, in person, and either physically or verbally accosted me, because then at least I would know, I could assess what's going on. And it's that lack of information that disempowers you and makes you feel victimized. And I never really realized that as to why people feel bullied by online harassment. Because, you know what? As much as the internet is a great place for good public discourse, it's also the world's bathroom wall, right? So you got to learn to filter things out. And for me, it was very eye-opening just having that first-person perspective on this. So,
because I'm not new to being bullied,
right?
And the way I've always looked at it is, you have the power. Like, you're saying that this threat disempowers you, and I don't agree with that. I think it's your apprehension that disempowers you. There's basically two responses you can have to an unnamed or undetermined threat. You can either be apprehensive about it, or you can be vigilant against it. And vigilance is where the power comes from. It's, it's not the elimination of the threat, but it's being aware and being prepared to deal with the threat, whatever it may be, that the power comes from. And it seems to me that you're running with the apprehension as opposed to the vigilance. And that's why you're feeling, disempowered.
I want to clarify tense, because you're not entirely wrong, but timelines are a little different. So I spent probably about a 4-hour period where, because it was an assault to my idea of community and safety and where I stood in the world, right? Rightly or wrongly about my perception of my place and the environment that I'm in and the realities of that environment, it popped my bubble, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And I really liked my bubble. I've had my bubble for like 30 years. Okay? It was a really comfortable bubble. It was a really gay bubble. Really shiny bubble.
Gay bubble.
No, but it was my bubble. And I totally agree with you. It's not something that I'm carrying on. I don't feel disempowered by it. I don't feel victimized. But there was that period, that Thursday, between 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock, where it threw me for a loop and I didn't know what to do. Right? And I felt incredibly lucky that I had resources that were willing to, and resources is such a weird word to use. There's my social work part of me coming out. But
people are not resources, damn it.
Well,
oil is a resource.
But they're institutions,
yeah,
right? And there are people, whether it be friends that found out about it, whether it be the Students Association that stood by me, whether it was security services offering me an escort between classes if I felt unsafe on campus, which isn't something I don't think anyone would ever ask for. But the fact that they were generous enough to say that was really, really assuring to me for those who may want something like that would be too embarrassed to ask. To be, brought into counseling services at the Wellness Center and, sat down with the counselor and addressed those emotions and those thoughts and put things into perspective. I felt incredibly lucky to be in a situation where by sending a single email instead of back to this person to IT, all this stuff kicked in. And I was taken care of and I could leave campus and forget about it. And really, since then, the only thing that I've heard is, the Calgary Police Service has got involved because that person is no longer a student, so now it's a jurisdictional thing, which is somewhat unfortunate for him.
What do you mean no longer a student?
He's not my understanding is that person is not an active student.
Okay, so at the time of the mail, it's not like recompense that he's been booted off of campus for calling you a faggot.
No, just a former student, which means that, the Office of Student Conduct no longer has any jurisdiction over his conduct. It becomes either a criminal or a civil matter at that point, right? But, short of that, when I left campus and came home, it was pretty much done with. And for me, the the gift, if you will, of that whole situation was becoming aware of the process. And as much as I tried to fight the fear, the emotions, which, like you said, it comes from not understanding, it comes from not having a plan, it comes from all these places, I realized that there are a lot of people out there younger than me, less confident than me, and in situations, or even older than me and more confident than me, but there are people who in situations where they don't have that type of mechanism around them that is going to react the way that it did. Maybe even in other institutions, I don't know. Or maybe even people within my own university who, wouldn't feel confident or comfortable or wouldn't even know that they could access these type of things by sending an email to IT or talking to security service and thinking that they would react badly or would brush it off. I mean, I thought I was pretty confident that when I went in to talk to security, they would take a report and it'd be filed on a database somewhere and whatnot. But they were actually quite offended that this had happened on their campus. And when it came time to file the report with the Calgary Police Service, again, my hesitation was, this kind of seems like it's overkill. And the constable was like, no, you know what? This type of thing, as a society, we can't tolerate this because it grows, right? So if I stay silent on something like this, especially if this person has a history, which it appears they do, assuming that the preliminary identification is valid, then my concern was twofold, right? So my immediate safety I felt okay with, but if this person has a history, or even if they didn't, what of the next person, right? Is the next person going to be able to speak up? Because people who feel confident in doing and hurting other people often tend to escalate. Not always, but it's an abusive pattern and should be addressed at any point. And so that's kind of where I was coming from, right? So it's easy to say this is a minor thing, get over it. And I would have loved to have gotten over it. I really tried hard to do it, but maybe it's my sense of civic duty or have you. And I think this is actually the most I've ever talked on this podcast, so sorry. But
I don't know why you're apologizing, but anyway.
Where does this end up, right? I for a while I was afraid for my safety, but then that dissipated. Then it became, well, what if this person escalates and assaults somebody or batters them? Or worse, or...
You sure wish you got a gun then, eh?
Well, I understand what you're saying with that, and in that context, I don't disagree with you, but I'm not a gun... even if we were in a country that allowed guns like that, I still would just choose not to have one. So, although I can understand the rationale for it, but that's beside the point. Then my thought process became, okay, how can I leverage this to reach out to other people and say, hey, you know what? As a person in the community in Calgary, the police service actually does take this seriously. There's an LGBT liaison office. There's a behavioral analysis unit that, looks at things like this and said, does it fall under hate crimes? Is this something we have to worry about? Are there indications of escalation over...
Why does it have to be a hate crime? Why does it have to be specific to sexual orientation? Can't it just be accepted as simply threatening without...
No, I agree with you, and that's not a distinction I'm asking for, but that's the legislation in which exists, right? So, and I'm totally willing to have that debate with you, but I think that's completely separate from where I'm going right now.
Right.
So for me, my next thing came to be, how can I turn this into a messaging or a learning opportunity? My God, I sound like an elitist academic, and I'm really sorry, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But
you're doing fine. Don't worry about it too much.
Says the PhD candidate.
Well, okay, but
my academic elitist.
My point was that sometimes people just need to, the thing about, there's so many things that you're saying, Will, that are resonating really strongly with some stories that I could tell, and so I guess the reason I'm saying that is that telling the story, no matter how it sounds, the heart of it is your heart in trying to express this to people. So the fact that you're sort of, okay, I sound like an academic elitist. I don't think that's the first thing that someone who appreciates this whole 20 minutes, that's not the first thing they're going to hear.
Right.
Right? And that's my point. And yes, I acknowledge that I am a PhD student and that potentially this means I'm parked up in the ivory tower. But still.
Right.
Okay.
Well, so my bottom line was this has happened. It's something that I think as an emotional and maybe, psychological issue I've solved and I've worked through. But then it becomes important for me to say to the Mount Royal community and to Calgary and whoever else will listen, whoever else will this message will resonate with, that, especially within Mount Royal, that these things are taken seriously. You don't have to remain silent. You can be confident that the people and processes in place, talk about alliteration, will respond, and they'll do so with respect and dignity and in a timely manner. Now, that is my experience. I'm a very visible person, and I don't think the fact that I'm running for vice president actually had anything to do with it. I would hope not, and I don't see why it would. Somebody may decide or may be able to make that claim, but I honestly don't think that has anything to do with it. I truly believe that on campus there's a team called Concerning Behavior on campus, and it's when anyway there's all these different things to make it a healthy, positive environment where students can just come to learn and be themselves and not have to worry about bullying and harassment. And I just want to attest to the world at large that is alive, that spirit is alive and well at Mount Royal.
Nice.
I got a question
as far as that goes.
Nice.
Do you think that the reaction would have been the same if you were straight?
I would hope so. I do.
Yeah, but do you think it would, though?
I don't know.
Do you think the fact that you're gay made you a special type of victim, and that you, like, do you think that might have played a role into deciding how the infrastructure around you reacted to your?
Within Mount Royal, no. Within the police service, possibly. But I don't have much experience with the Calgary Police Service and their culture, so I'm only speaking off of maybe cultural biases, right? I really don't know. I know that there is a lot of, or I'm aware, rather, I don't know, but I'm aware that there's a lot of sensitivity training around bullying and harassment that are given to officers, that the police service in Calgary makes attempts to educate their members to take it seriously and not brush it off, because it's often the little things that get overlooked, that, when people do step forward to say this person is bullying me, and when nobody responds, then the victim then takes that message that nobody cares, and as things escalate, they don't feel that they have an ally. Right? So I think that the police service recognizes that. That was my experience. I don't know if that's true from a straight perspective. I would imagine it would be so, but I can't attest to that.
Not perspective. Perspective is irrelevant. Would they have reacted the same way if it was a straight person being told?
I have no reason to believe otherwise. But, I mean, you know what? Maybe in my next life I'll come back as a straight person and you can accost me via email and we'll find out.
No, I think where my cynicism comes from is that if it wasn't, prefaced with "Hey, faggot,"
right?
Would have the security services, reacted with such alacrity?
So maybe if the email was "Hey, breeder,"
or not even that. What if it was just "Hey, Will, I hate you," right?
I think within Mount Royal, yes. I honestly believe that they wouldn't make that distinction.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm just being cynical.
The city at large, and again, I mean, I'm speculating, right? I don't have any evidence to suggest one way or the other. It's not like I've surveyed the campus. I don't, there's not like some victim support group or whatever of e-bullying that they've put me up with. I haven't talked to people about this other than my friends who are like, oh my God, I can't believe this happens here. and I don't know if it happens. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the frequency is.
Well,
it
will happen all the time. There's always going to be people who behave that way,
right? But it's to what degree and to what frequency, right? So, yeah, I would have to say, Ducky, that I would assume the affirmative, but I have no evidence, and that is the rationalist point of me, not the.
Yeah.
I'm not going to assert something I don't know, because that's just not me. You know that.
No, I just thought it was worth asking. That's all.
No, it's a good point. And because you know what, if you don't
our
ask
society
that,
seems to be very much like we have this guy in Saskatchewan at the Supreme Court last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our whole society seems to be.
Sorry, can you elaborate that for people who don't live in Saskatchewan?
Yes,
please. What the hell is his name? He was I don't know if he was a pastor or if he was just some guy, but he was handing out flyers talking about how homosexuality was the source of all evil, and that gay people in society represented a clear and present danger, and that actions need to be taken by either society, by citizens themselves, or by the government to combat or counter the dangerous influence that the homosexual agenda is having on society. And the Supreme
Court... It's
Court...
called a party plan, not an agenda. I just want to clarify that. No, sorry. I'm making light and I shouldn't.
Yeah, anyway, so the Supreme Court recently upheld his hate crime conviction. That it's not free speech if it's, being critical of protected groups. And that's kind of indicative of the way I see our society going around, is that we are so concerned with protecting specific groups that we're focusing more on the character of the victim than the nature of the crime.
Right.
And I think that's kind of my perspective.
I think I had a couple friends that are human rights-ish folks sort of say that the case was not actually about hate speech, it was about hate literature. And there's actually a legal test that's applied to make that determination, and two of the gentleman's pamphlets failed.
Yeah, well, the thing though, like, I'm not going to deny that he was advocating violence.
Right. Which is why it was hate
an identifiable
right?
group. No, that is a threat of bodily harm, and that is inciting riot. It is not hate speech, and that's my problem. There's
a legal definition of hatred. It's not meant emotionally. This is okay. So I'm going to disclaim very clearly that I'm going off of friends of mine that are supposed to know better than I. I don't know very much about this, but apparently the definition of hatred, when it applies to literature, is very specific and doesn't have to do with emotional impulse. So two of the gentleman's pamphlets fit the definition of hatred when it applies to distributed literature, and two of them didn't, and he distributed 4 of them. Apparently 4 different types of lit, and 2 of them failed the test, and this is why they upheld his conviction. So if you're inciting violence, because that's the determination.
Yes,
right.
But my point is, my cat just punched me. What do you want?
He hates you.
She. No, but see, my point is that's indicative of the crime. That the crime is the inciting violence. It is not. It's irrelevant who the target is.
Right.
Right. But because the target is gay people, it's suddenly a hate crime, and that's my concern. I'm not trying to defend this guy. I don't think that his conviction is unjust. Right. I just think it's the wrong conviction. Right? I mean, you have people who advocate violence against men all the time, and nobody bats an eye at it. It's not illegal. It's encouraged by the state. Right? I mean,
all of the things. Okay, like if people actually advocate violence against men, they should be penalized appropriately.
Yes, they should. But my point is that men are not a protected group, and that's why hate crime legislation doesn't apply to men. It doesn't apply to straight people. It doesn't apply to.
Here's
right?
a concept. But here's a concept, right? That you and I are going to go back and forth on, and this is okay. But the concept of privilege actually exists.
Oh
okay?
No.
And yes, it does.
Okay, stop using privilege to justify everything. Okay?
I'm not. I'm saying.
Let him define his term.
Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that let's name all of my privileges and lack thereof. I'm a white academic male who can pass as heterosexual, but probably the reason why I can pass as heterosexual is because I'm disabled.
No, the fact that you're employed is a privilege, okay? The fact that you live in a country where you're not, a slave, that's a privilege, okay? Being white's not a fucking privilege.
It is when most of the systems that we have actually assume whiteness in basic operations.
Okay, hold on a second. Because I think, again, this is a common problem that, my two friends here have, is maybe operating on two different definitions of the same word. So let's clarify, Rob, what you mean by privilege.
What I mean is that there are societal and systemic biases towards certain perspectives rather than others.
So why can't we say that there's a white bias?
Why can't we? There is a white bias.
Then why use the word privilege? Because
the white bias is actually... I'm not saying that specific individuals are like getting out and pushing, okay? But most... how do I put this? The way that society works assumes that the majority perspective is going to be white, is going to be male, is going to be straight, is going to be employed, is going to be able, is going to be not suffering from mental illness, and all of these different things. And because this is assumed that this is normal, there are ways that society functions that actually penalize people that are not within those groups. Okay, so for me,
So are we... Sorry, I just want to clarify. Penalize or fails to accommodate?
Both.
Okay. Fair enough.
It depends on the situation. I certainly hope it wouldn't be penalized, but certainly there's a failure of accommodation. Part of the failure of accommodation too is that people are categorized as persons rather than as part of groups that are having problems in the wider social context. So I don't agree fully with the way that Canadian society isolates particular groups. But I do think that there are groups, for example, speaking as a member of both, gay people suffer a great deal of violence in certain circumstances, and so do the disabled, precisely because they are gay and disabled. And so when the primary motive of a given crime is the fact that I'm a member of those two identifiable populations, it's a hate crime.
So I think that Ducky might say, and I know I'm speaking for you, Ducky, so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he might say, why should it matter what the emotional or what the motive is? I mean, we can only infer intent. We can't prove.
If the person tells you
intent.
If the person tells you, I kicked his face in because he was a fucking faggot,
but
that's
what
a hate
makes
crime.
Okay, fair enough. But why is that any more severe than just kicking his face in?
Because you could. Well, I don't know about severe, but the thing is that we don't approve as a society, or at least we shouldn't, of discriminating because of specific, important, usually changeless characteristics.
Why make the distinction, though?
Because
isn't assault not an assault?
Well, an assault is an assault, but that's the problem potentially. An assault is an assault. Okay, an assault is an assault, but if you only look at it that way, so you should, like, whoever makes an assault should be penalized as though it's an assault. But you should also have within your framework of analysis a way to determine if there are patterns that align with specific characteristics. And so it's the problem that I just mentioned about, at least in Ontario, I don't know about Alberta or other places, but in Ontario, laws about disability only mention disabled persons. And that's actually a problem because it prevents people from looking for, is the kind of problem that person X with a disability is reporting, does it tend to be a problem for many, many others who identify as visibly or mentally disabled? And if you don't have a category that allows you to look for those patterns, you can't actually prevent root causes in the same way.
I think you're going to have to step me through this a bit.
Am I allowed to put something in here?
No, please do, sorry.
My issue with the term privilege is that it's a way of justifying discrimination. That is why I hate it when Bob tries to use it to justify stuff. The line of reasoning that I saw him following, I could be wrong, but when I was saying why aren't there groups or special protections for white people or straight men or whatever, you said privilege, which leads me to follow the line of reasoning. Hey, let me finish. Okay. I didn't interrupt you,
they
okay?
They already have it. Well, that's what I was claiming. You're right.
No.
Let him finish.
That because they're a air quote privileged group, they're therefore not worthy of the same protection as the air quote unprivileged group. And I think that is inherently unjust. That is just a way to justify bigotry against groups that you resent. And that's why I fucking hate people who call or who use privilege. Let me rephrase that. I fucking hate it when people use privilege as a way to justify their discrimination.
Okay, I completely understand why that would upset you if that's what I just said, but I didn't. Okay, so
you're saying that.
Okay,
you're
now
saying,
let me correct.
Okay, then explain to me.
Because I explained what you just said makes complete sense to me. If that is what I just said, I didn't. So
then explain to me why white, straight men are not protected under hate crimes when they're being attacked for being white, straight men.
How do you know they're not being protected?
Have you gone to a human rights tribunal?
No.
Okay, look, I'm sorry, but no, there are people who have been attacked, assaulted, they've had their things stolen, their houses shut down, they've had governments take their stuff away, all because they're white or straight or male. And they've gone to the human rights commissions to say, hey, look, I need some help. And the human rights commissions have gone, well, you're white, straight, and male, so fuck you. You're not one of the protected groups. Because under Section 13 of the human rights, whatever, men, whites and straight people are not protected groups. Explicitly protected groups. That's right.
Okay, so I think the issue here is special rights versus equal rights.
Right. So if we're going to be making distinctions about hate crimes based on identifiable groups, then we have to be willing to make those distinctions based on all identifiable groups, rather than picking and choosing.
And I don't have a problem with that, because the problem that I had with what you said, in terms of how you heard what I said, Ducky, is I did not make a comment about anybody's worthiness to be protected. I was trying to explain why I use the term privilege. It has nothing to do with trying to say that someone's perspective or how their lives are, how they are as people, those things are worthy. I do think that statistically speaking, there is much lower problems with some of the groups that are not explicitly protected, which is why they're not explicitly protected. So perhaps
I don't agree with that at all.
I know you don't, but my point is that the reason why I would agree with your comment, if that's what I meant, is if I was actually saying that white
then
straight
why did
men,
you even use privilege at the first place?
Because privilege has to do with whether benefits accrue because of a given status, okay? Or whether things that should be given are withheld because of a given status. And speaking as a gay disabled man, there are things that are withheld from me because of my status. Okay? Now,
Well,
I think if
club.
I were to go to a human rights tribunal, I haven't felt the need to, but there's certainly certain things that are not accommodated or are withheld because there are people who are straight and there are people who are able-bodied who haven't had to think through the kinds of issues that I deal with. So in the areas where I am not straight and I am disabled, there is privilege for those groups that will tend to collect without them even thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's just utter poppycock.
Why?
Why do I think it's poppycock?
Yeah.
Because it's demonstrably nonsensical. I mean, you can't turn around and say that there is a systemic bias towards specific groups.
Why can't you?
Because it doesn't actually exist. You know, you want to talk about
who are you listening to, or
it doesn't matter who I'm listening to. It's not an appeal from authority. Listen to the logic.
Can I
okay?
agree with your logic, so I want some. I don't agree with your logic. Okay, so what I'm trying to do when I'm asking who are you reading or who are you listening to, that they're disagreeing with my definition of privilege, I want to know.
I'm not disagreeing with your definition of privilege.
Okay, but you don't.
Okay.
You
well,
don't,
yes, I am. Okay. What I'm disagreeing with is your assertion that it's systemic and it's demonstrable.
I understand that. So what I want to know is where you're getting your information from. Because I don't agree with your logic, so now I want to talk to you about information. Because
I haven't provided my logic yet. You keep interrupting me with, who are you listening to? Who's filling your head with these crazy ideas?
That's not what he's saying at all, Ducky.
That's what it sounds like.
I think you're reading it in, because I don't know why, but you assume I'm going to be a trigger-happy liberal that wants to jump down your throat. I want to understand your perspective because it's completely alien to me, Ducky.
Then stop interrupting me and let me finish, please, okay? When you talk about systemic societal bias in support of certain groups, I find that patently absurd. Because I have never in my entire life seen a story where it's been acceptable for somebody to prefer one person or another because of their race, color, or creed, unless it's because they're not white, not male, not straight.
Type things.
Right. You know? That's why I'm really pissed off at this sort of idea that there's systemic discrimination or bias in support of white mates, straight males, because there's systemic discrimination against white straight males. If there was a bias, if there was privilege, if it was a male-dominated or white-dominated or straight-dominated society, all these fucking discriminations against them would not be permitted. It would not be accepted, and it would not be allowed. And yet they are. And that right there is inherent proof that there's no systemic privilege for white straight males.
I don't follow the logic I don't think because a central claim that you just made, if I heard you correctly. So this is me trying to be, I'm really trying hard to be open-hearted here, okay? If I heard you correctly, just because you haven't seen it and because you don't understand why it can occur does not mean it doesn't occur. Because now you've always been...
No, I just gave you a reason why it cannot occur.
I don't, but it doesn't follow because... And the reason why for me the logic doesn't follow is because it occurs anyway. Like we try to prevent, because a lot of people who assume that privilege exists is why people with different perspectives are now allowed to speak. Okay? It was...
What do you mean allowed to speak?
Well, we have inherent dignity anyway, but what I mean is that society...
What does dignity have to do with being allowed to speak? See, this is where all your discussion and all your talking is making no sense, because we're talking about privilege, not being allowed to speak.
But that has something to do with it. That definitely has something to do with it. Okay, so
how?
Okay, I'll give you an example based on my study of history. Okay, in England, the established church was the Church of England, Anglicanism, as it's now known worldwide. Okay, what that actually meant was that there was a legal act called the Act of Conformity that if you wanted to be clergy, you had to sign it. If you did not, you became part of what's called the non-conforming churches. They didn't have any power in any social processes. It was illegal in England to be Catholic for a lot. Okay, so Anglican Christians that were most of the society were privileged and specifically excluded the voices of Catholics and Baptists and Mennonites and Lutherans and etc.
Okay. That's explicit. I can agree with that. That's not privilege, that's discrimination.
That is what people mean when they say privilege. When a system is deliberately excluding people who, because they have dignity. So then
find me some explicit law or government or body that explicitly is discriminating against groups that are not like themselves. Not this phantom, there's this bias, so we need to protect everybody else.
I can offer up an example for that.
Please do.
Canadian Blood Services bans blood donations by gay men who've had sex between now and 1979.
1977, actually, but yeah.
Oh, 77.
And I would consider that discrimination then. That's not privilege.
It is privilege. It is privilege.
How is that privilege?
Because anyone who's straight, can potentially give blood, and gay men who have, at least in the social science research, have extraordinary levels of community altruism.
Then maybe we're arguing, because to me privilege is an inherent benefit, something that you get that you don't deserve. And I don't think that giving blood is a benefit.
Sure it is.
No, it's not.
Why not?
Receiving the fucking blood is a benefit. If the blood services turned around and said, well, sorry, we don't give blood to gay men, we only give it to straight men.
Okay.
Then yes, that could be considered a form of privilege.
But
that's overt discrimination, and it's demonstrable.
But I'm being denied the privilege of
contributing to society,
contributing and feeling a satisfaction of fulfilling civic duty, or however else a moral duty of contributing to the well-being of my fellow man.
Right.
Simply because I'm sexually active. No other reason. Never mind that, females between certain age groups are at higher risk for HIV, and in certain, that if you want to peg it down to, cultural groups, gay men are not the high risks. But that shouldn't be the test anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not debating that it should be. I'm just saying that that's overt discrimination.
It is.
right?
Right. But
does that mean we need special protections for gay men now?
No, I think we should have an equal policy.
Or does that mean that we need to change Canada Blood Services so that they don't discriminate anymore?
Sure, but I guess that in my context, Ducky, the group who currently is allowed to discriminate is the one that's designated as...
Nobody's allowed to discriminate, though.
But in the Blood Services example, it's in their rules. They are allowed to discriminate against gay men, because the question on the blood form is, have you had sex with a man? If you're a male, have you had sex with a man even one time since 1977? Yes, no. If your answer is yes, you are automatically excluded because of a policy that's written higher up at Canadian Blood Services. So the group that's writing that policy is the privileged group because they are allowed to discriminate. That's what privilege is.
They're executing their privilege to discriminate, is what you're arguing.
Yes.
Because of their position of power.
Right. Yes.
I can see that. I guess I can understand that. I mean, I can't say I'm committed to it, but at least I can see it.
Yeah, I can understand that position, and it's arguably agreeable.
Okay. My
problem is where... Okay, so how do you remove that privilege? When do you decide that privilege no longer exists? When they stop discriminating? When gay men are allowed?
Yeah, well, I would say that's...
all right. So we have a metric by which we can judge whether or not the elite at Canada Blood Services, because these Canadian Blood Services is an entity. It's not even a person, right?
Which is why I often use the term systemic, is because there's a system.
Yes, but my point is that it's not the straight people who are donating blood that are the discriminators against the gay people.
Right. And
right?
Yes.
So by saying the straight people have the privilege, which is being allowed to discriminate, is inherently flawed. Because it's not the people who are allowed to discriminate, it's the body. The Canadian Blood Services entity that's allowed to discriminate.
But this is what I agree with you. But this
right?
is why
let me finish. Let me finish with it.
Because you described for me exactly something that I was trying to say to you earlier. The fact that it's a body, right, like Canadian Blood Services, is why I use the term systemic. Because I'm not complaining about individuals, right? That's why I use the term systemic, is because there are
Yes, but it's not the straight people that... My point is that the privilege is centered within the body. It's not centered within the sexual orientation. It's not the straight people that have the privilege. It's Canada Blood Services that has the privilege.
It's not straight privilege, it's government privilege.
Right, okay? And the idea that you can take that sort of archetype and see, we have a metric by which we can judge whether that privilege still exists. Right. Can Canada Blood Services still discriminate against gay men? If they can, okay, rather than they can discriminate against contaminated blood.
Right.
Okay? But not against the people who are donating that blood.
Right.
Whether they're gay or straight. Okay? And to assume that gay people provide contaminated blood by default is discrimination. Yes. I'll agree with it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay? My point is that when you have a deliberate, overt demonstration of discrimination, you have a metric by which you can judge whether that privilege, as you call it, has been eliminated. Okay? Right. When you try to say that white people have a systemic bias, and then you can't turn around and demonstrate how or where or by what... Okay, because...
I think I know where you're getting at, because if I may, while you collect your thoughts, Ducky, just give me 1 minute. What I'm hearing here is what you're upset at when, say, a group that is suffering discrimination from another privileged group. So let's say in this case, the group is gay men or homosexuals are being discriminated against. Then... Because the more I think about it, it seems like as the homosexuals are being discriminated, then and the heterosexuals or not, then it becomes easy to say it's heterosexuals that are discriminating against me. And if it is black people that are being discriminated against, then it's easy to say that white people are discriminating against me. So we're attributing it to the opposite label, or maybe an alternative label, as opposed to the and you were talking about, systems of discrimination, the systematic function of it. So it's not that it's systematically a white person or systematically white people discriminating against black people, but there is a system that is discriminating against black people. Yes. Now, maybe populated with white people, and it most likely would be.
Yes, and that is a premise
the government
with which
that's the problem, not the white person that's the problem, or it's the institution that's the problem.
Right. That's the premise. That is a premise with which I have no issue. My issue is when you take one step further and say, because black people are being discriminated against by this government body, that means that white people are inherently not allowed or capable of being discriminated against. And if they are, then we shouldn't even care, because whatever. It's not like they're black people.
Right. Well,
and that's what fucking pisses me off.
That's a fair comment.
There's no, and I agree with you, Ducky. But I think,
and so long as you refuse to acknowledge metrics by which to judge this so-called privilege,
he doesn't.
I am not refusing to acknowledge metrics. I guess what I'm trying to say is that last step that you made about saying it's impossible to discriminate against white people is not a necessary step to call what we've been talking about in this conversation. So if there are systems that have been set up that are discriminating, it's not localized to one particular person. You still need metrics to decide if the bias is no longer present, right?
Yes, but when you turn around and you use a phrase like privilege to demonstrate that a group in power has power, it's a way of saying basically that they're incapable of being discriminated against. That's why I hate affirmative action. That's why I hate the concept of privilege. Okay, because they're made up functions that are designed to justify discrimination.
I think
discrimination is okay as long as you're discriminating against the right kind of people.
It's a reverse discriminatory policy.
I think, and that's still wrong.
I think so. But we are not yet at equality or equity or whatever you want to call it.
You don't have to have equity. You have to have fair treatment.
That is what I mean by equity. That is what I mean by equity.
Well, that's not what equity means. Okay, equity means that everybody is the same.
No.
Okay? Fair treatment means that they're treated regardless of how they're different. Or they're treated the same way regardless of how they're different from one another.
Well, sometimes it's... But, see, here's the thing. You do need to accommodate differences.
No, you don't.
Yes, you do.
No, you don't. It's the indifference to differences.
Liberal universalism. Congratulations.
Don't you fucking condescend to me.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just really frustrated. I'm really frustrated. Because the thing is, I hope to God that if I'm in front of a human rights tribunal, and I'm telling my story, I hope to God that while they're on the way to treating me fairly under the law, they take into account the circumstances that generated my story. And so my award that grants me equity in a given situation will look different because I'm disabled and because I'm gay and because of whatever's involved in that complaint.
Right, so basically that's asking for special treatment because of what makes you different from everybody else.
If the award...
Look, if I have a problem that's the same as your problem and we both go to the same body...
If it is the same, yes. If it's actually apples to apples, yes.
And then they decide to treat you differently because you're gay than the way they treat me.
So you don't think that there's any room for any type of mitigating circumstances?
Thank you, Will. This is what I'm saying. There has to be room circumstances. There has to be.
There honestly has to be, because otherwise, I mean, short of a mob action, you can't say that any action is equal. And even within a mob action, you can't say that actions are equal.
Okay, I don't know what you mean by that.
That justice is always going to be relative.
I would like to point out, just so that Ducky knows that we're trying to talk about the same thing. Equity, noun. 1. The quality of being fair and impartial. Equity of treatment. 2.
Yes, impartial.
Yeah?
What does that mean to you? What does impartial mean?
Fair.
No, what does impartial mean? It doesn't mean fair. It means lack of bias. Okay, so if you have a bias in support, if you have a lack of bias, that means you can't make your decisions based on a person's, circumstance.
Yes, you can.
No, you cannot. That's the inherent nature of bias. That's why I get so frustrated when people talk about this privilege. I don't have a whole fucking systemic system designed to protect me because of my sexuality. Okay?
Really?
That's a privilege gay
sure
people
about
have.
That?
Yes. I don't have special protections because I'm straight.
You have the force of thousands of years of social convention on your side. You do.
Find me where there's a law written that says straight people are specifically privileged.
Not everything is legally defined.
Thank you.
I mean, laws are definitions of norms.
Right.
Generally
Okay. So
norms.
if you're going to use, that's why I have this problem with privilege, because it's so nebulous. If you are going to try to use legal definitions and overt discrimination as a way to combat this perceived systemic covert discrimination that you're claiming is there, but you can't demonstrate it.
But the thing is that how do you deal with covert stuff? I'm never once have I at least intended to invoke the authority of the state or any legal mechanisms. Okay, I don't recall intending to do that. So what I'm trying to say is that there can be covert stuff all over the place. And I think from trying to listen to your stories, Ducky, and your analysis, you catch a lot of covert bullshit because you don't have a certain level of education, and you happen to be white and young and male. And probably straight too. And so you catch a lot of covert stuff because of laws or legal mechanisms that are trying to prevent or address systemic problems. And so you're one of the people that don't fall within, these laws are supposed to deal with 2 standard deviations of the mean sort of thing, and you fall in the outer edges, and so you are getting shafted. And I hear that, and it doesn't mean that the problem that you're having exists, and it doesn't negate that the problems that I'm describing exist. The two.
I'm not arguing that they don't exist. Okay? What I'm saying is that any sense of justice and fair recompense cannot be based in discrimination.
I agree with you, and me and you've had this conversation before, but justice and equity are 2 separate concepts. And within our legal tradition, our courts are tasked with addressing both issues in tandem. It used to be under the British court system that you would be prosecuted under the courts of justice, and then you would apply to the courts of equity. Highly inefficient, of course.
Yes.
And that's why we no longer do it that way. Our judges are tasked, and our tribunals and mediators and so forth are tasked with applying concepts of justice and equity at the same time. And maybe that's where the distinction is. Maybe you just rather not equity. I don't know. Is that fair?
I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
You don't sound convinced by that. Like, what are you thinking, Ducky?
That I'm tired.
You're tired.
And that has been an hour and a half.
It has been.
If I just want to boil it down to one statement.
Okay.
Either you agree or you disagree that discrimination is wrong. That it is unjust. Either you agree or disagree. And if you agree that discrimination is unjust, you cannot support any kind of discrimination. Like that's where I keep running into this wall with Bob in particular, and with people who share his ideology, is that discrimination is perfectly okay as long as it's discriminating against with the group that we think is okay to be discriminated against. And I don't care what that group is. Discrimination is wrong regardless of whether it's in support of one group or in the detriment of another.
I think that what's going on is there might be trouble hearing each other, right? So what you're hearing Rob say, you're hearing through your worldview, and vice versa. I mean, I can see where each of you are coming from, and you guys really aren't that far off.
No.
Yet you feel like you're on opposite continents, and this is the eternal function of your relationship. And I don't know if that's something solvable. And maybe the day we solve it, we won't have a podcast. So I don't know. Really,
or we won't have listeners. I don't know. Maybe everybody loves to listen to us bicker all the time.
Maybe.
So, but yeah, I don't know.
You guys really are so close. I think it's just that you're approaching the same. When the concept is presented, you're almost trying to address a different side of it, as opposed to trying to negotiate the same side of it and what it looks like.
Yes, this is what I've been trying to say for the past 15 minutes. Yes, that's exactly it.
You know, thematically, you guys are at least thematically consistent in your discourse, so I'll give you that much.
Cool.
Rob, any final thoughts or parting shots?
Oh, well, I try not to take parting shots. I'm a pacifist. I've actually really enjoyed this discussion.
Except you're a socialist.
Please. Please. I'm not a statist though. So I think there are ways of being socialist that don't rely on the state. Anyway, you know, this is because I'm a Christian.
That's something we'll have to discuss later.
This is because I'm a Christian that I say this. Which, by the way, is a privileged group in society. So I'll own that privilege for a moment. I've enjoyed this conversation. Thanks, Will, for your story. And I think I understand, Ducky, a little bit more of where you're coming from. And I don't know if you feel heard by me, but I do feel like I understand.
I don't know.
So, okay, well,
like I said,
enough.
I don't know if it's half just talking to a wall, or if it's just me being contradictory and inarticulate. Because I really feel like I'm not arguing very well right now.
Okay, fair enough.
I think you guys are making small steps at approaching the same corner. So
fair.
You know, it's
I would make me happy if that were the case.
As the podcasts go on and these conversations go on, one consistent theme I'm hearing is actually agreement, which is an achievement from both sides.
Yes,
and Josh, you know, even brought that up, and I know you thought it was maybe potentially condescending, Ducky, but it really is. You guys are agreeing with each other more. Whether or not you're internalizing is completely different, but at least you're hearing each other. So, and I think it's just what's happening is you're learning each other's ideologies so that you can frame your argument within the context of the other person's ideology. And part of that is the argument that has to be made so that you can, you know, get that peg through that square peg through that round hole. There's got to be some smushing. So,
well, fair enough.
Or just make it a really big round hole.
Let's just smush along then, shall we? But yeah, that's my comment. So,
any final thoughts, parting shots there, Mallard guy?
I had some, and then Bob started talking, and they flipped right out of my head. so I guess hooray for Captain Power. New Tomb Raider game comes out on Tuesday, which I just pre-purchased. So I'll see what that's like. I did hear Tim Abseth, who runs the Control-Alt-Delete site, did a little talking about how he's really glad that the reboot has taken Lara Croft away from being tits with guns and turned her into an actual character.
Yay!
Which I think is good. And then I got into an argument with Timmy, because Timmy was all like, you only play it for tits and guns. Don't try to make... I think he was just being a dick, but...
You should see the upgrades they did in PlanetSide to the female characters. You can see their butts a mile away. It's actually kind of gross, but anyway.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But, yeah.
Final thoughts and parting shots.
Yeah.
Thank you for voting for me, all those who did, and I will gladly serve out my term in office, or not. Whatever the case may be.
I'll see you in 4 years.
Yeah, well, 1 more year, actually. Terms are 1 year, which is one of the things I'm campaigning against, but whatever. So next time you hear me, or I could potentially be a real, full-fledged, true-blood politician as opposed to a failed wannabe. I mean, not that I'm a failed wannabe. It's going to be one of the two. So.
Wait. If you're a wannabe, how can you have failed?
Touche. I'll take that.
If you're a failed wannabe, wouldn't that mean that you
didn't try?
Were elected? No, a failed wannabe means that, like, a wannabe is something
successful.
That is,
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, right?
So I'm either going to be a wannabe or an is.
Yeah.
So tune in next week to find out whether or not Will is or wants to be or whatever.
Fair enough.
However that works. So I think that our music today is Dumb Ways to Die.
Okay.
Can
we talk about that a little bit?
You don't like that?
Well, I need to go.
I love it. I think it's brilliant.
Okay, then let's do it.
I just hope that the message isn't lost.
Yeah, it's very important to pay attention to the message at the end of the song. I'll give you the hint of that. Or you can, once you've heard it, you Google the YouTube video of it, which is quite hilarious. It's actually an advertisement out of the UK. So we'll frame it that way. And for the rest of it, we'll just let you listen and see if you get it. Talk to you next week. Say bye, boys.
Bye, boys.
Set fire to your hair, poke a stick at a grizzly bear, eat medicine that's out of date, use your private parts as piranha bait. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Get your toast out with a fork, do your own electrical work, teach yourself how to fly, eat a 2-week-old unrefrigerated pie. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Invite a psycho killer inside, scratch a drug dealer's brand new ride. Take your helmet off in outer space, use a clothes dryer as a hiding place. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Keep a rattlesnake as a pet, sell both your kidneys on the internet. Eat a tube of super glue. I wonder, what's this red button do? Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die, so many dumb ways to die. Dress up like a moose during hunting season, disturb a nest of wasps for no good reason. stand on the edge of a train station platform. Drive around the boom gates at a level crossing. Run across the tracks between the platforms. They may not rhyme, but they're quite possibly the dumbest ways to die. The dumbest ways to die. The dumbest ways to die. So many dumb ways to die.
Be safe around trains. A message from Metro.
Thank you for listening to Hardly Qualified. Our website can be found at hardlyqualified.ca, and there you can download episodes, leave comments, and check references and links mentioned in the shows. The hosts are on Twitter. Will is at Will Connor, Rob is at Theology Writer, and Ducky is at angryduck_HQ. They can also be reached by email at will, rob, or angryduck@hardlyqualified.ca. All music, unless otherwise specified, is from the game EVE Online and is property of CCP Games. The music can be found at community.eveonline.com/downloads/music. No copyright infringement is intended. The podcast is recorded on Saturday afternoons and scheduled for download the following Friday, which can also be found on iTunes. Thank you, and tune in next week.